All right, my clock shows that it's 5 o'clock, and we've got an opportunity now to spend a few minutes together. I appreciate everybody that's been taking the time out of their schedules to join us, whether it's live here on Zoom or watching us on their TV, usually with a Roku device or a Boxcast app or Amazon. You know, there's some other ways to get a hold of Boxcast, even through your phone and things like that. And then again, Facebook, we also have a lot of folks that join us on over there. That just got started. And I am pulling that up. I'm gonna try to, there we go, mute that so that I can see comments and things that everybody is making. Really glad to see everybody that's been looking forward to joining us tonight, and I appreciate those that have done that. I don't know who saw a post about today. I try to put something out there just on Facebook just to kind of give everybody a little heads up, a little reminder, something to get you thinking about what we're going to be talking about tonight, and decided we would throw us a little party. So I'm going to tell you what I mean by that as we get into our Bible study. We're going to be in Psalms tonight, so you can grab a Bible and go ahead and open it up there, just the general area of the Psalms, and I'll tell you where we're going to be for that point. But we're going to be talking about having a party, throwing a party. I had a phone call yesterday, and it lasted, well, not really a phone call, it was a video conference, and it lasted a little bit over 3 hours. And after spending some time thinking about it for a little bit, I decided we needed to throw a party. This is something, honestly, that we could have talked about earlier, and could have been something that we've done already in this forum, but until it hits you, until it gets and it becomes a part of your reality and a part of your life, it's hard to think along those lines. And so that's where I am, and it just happened to me. Because it happened to me, I'm bringing it into today. So if you've thought about this for several weeks now, if you've been thinking about this over and over, then definitely know that I'm just slow catching up, but you are not wrong in your thoughts and things. Appreciate everybody over on Facebook, Jackie Goodman and a whole bunch of other folks saying hello, and I'm glad for that. Hopefully, if we have comments tonight, I'll be able to read those off. Please send me some thoughts tonight. This is really going to be an arena where I'd like to hear your feedback, because the kind of party that we're throwing tonight is a pity party. A pity party. Now, I know that you've heard the words pity party before, and none of us really like the idea of a pity party, but I thought tonight I'm going to throw myself a little pity party, and maybe you would want to join in. Now, doesn't mean this whole night is just going to be doom and gloom, wailing and gnashing of teeth, that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm interested in doing. But I am interested in getting some things off of my chest, and I'm interested in hearing from you and giving you the opportunity to sound off on some things as well. What I mean by that is this. Yesterday morning, historic event, maybe not in the grand scheme of things for the rest of the world, but the summer camp that I've been a part of and been a director for a week of camp for a number of years, had a meeting yesterday, all of the directors, all the board members, to discuss this whole current situation and figure some things out. And like a lot of camps here in Alabama, a couple up in Tennessee, some in North Carolina that we know about, and then our camp in South Carolina have been really struggling to answer these questions and figure out a way forward. But we just this past week, the CDC and some of the local government officials and states and things published their recommendations for how to have a camp. If you want to get together and have camp, here are the recommendations you're going to need to follow. Here are the guidelines that we think are really important, and you're going to need to do these things in order to provide a safe environment for you folks. After conferring with a doctor for over an hour and discussing amongst ourselves the list of requirements that would be necessary to follow, the vote that the board decided, and all it takes is a majority, and that was the majority decided it was not feasible to have camp under the conditions that they had been that we had been told we were going to need to put into place. The things we would have to do, and all these kinds of restrictions, and people, you're out there, you know that kind of stuff. Let me see, I got lost, I'm sorry. Admit if it's not too late. Maybe too late. Okay, good deal. Apologize for people that have been in the waiting room. There we go. I didn't mean to leave you out, but I'm glad you're here now. And we've got a couple other folks. I'm going to want some feedback. So here's what we're doing. I'm throwing a pity party because my grandfather helped to start this Bible camp, Palmetto Bible Camp, back in 1969. So we've been going on 50 years of Bible camp, and I've been going to camp since I was 2 years old. My dad was a director of a week of Bible camp when I was a little kid, and then I got on the board of directors in 2003. So I've been on the board myself for nearly 17 years, and then I've been directing a week of camp for 10 years or more. And this is the first time in over 50 years that we have not been able to have any weeks of camp for the entire summer. And I just learned that yesterday, and I've been getting in touch with my team, my leadership team, my staff. Obviously had to tell my kids that we weren't going to be able to go to camp this year. And that broke my heart. That's just putting it mildly. And I'm trying to, behave myself and put on a good show right now. But the bottom line is, yesterday was a really rough day. And so I got to thinking about what else has disappeared over the course of these last couple of months because of the virus and the liabilities that have been attached to it and the things that have been canceled and way. And so here's the pity party. We're going to spend the first half of time in our pity party talking about what we have lost and what we are grieving about. And I want to hear from you guys. I got some other things on my list, things that have been taken away from me due to this whole ridiculous situation that frustrates me. And then I want to open it up. I'm talking now to give you guys time to be thinking about it, but maybe it's over on Facebook and you want to put a comment out, or some of the folks that are here. But, this week of camp has been taken away. For the past probably 5 years, I've gone to North Carolina and spent a week teaching a group of lifeguard students at a different camp, and it's in the mountains, and I usually get to take a day to go on the Appalachian Trail and spend the night on the Appalachian Trail before I come back, and then come back home. And I always look forward to that, and that was canceled as well because their camp isn't going to be able to meet. In the summertime, we're looking forward to having our summer series pick up on June the 3rd. Great speakers, great connections to the Petersville family over the years because we're celebrating our 40th anniversary as a congregation. And so we're looking forward to that. Austin Oakley is going to be our first speaker on June the 3rd. So I'm really excited about him kicking it off for us. But a lot of congregations aren't having their summer series. I look forward to the opportunities to go and speak there. I've already had 2 of those that have been canceled. A third has turned into a virtual summer series. So I'm going to record a lesson and then present that. So, at least I get to have some kind of involvement there. it's not as big a deal to me. And so I'm going to leave this up for somebody else to talk about, when they've got it on their mind. But I did obtain a degree from a university. I'm wearing a shirt for them today. Woohoo! Represent, heritage. Really cool. I'm thankful for that. And I graduated. It took me 3 years of taking classes and doubling up on responsibilities and putting in long hours and work. And I'm proud of that. But obviously that graduation ceremony didn't happen. What else is out there? I want you guys to tell me. I don't know if anybody here. Mary, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. All right, you're unmuted, Mary. Go ahead. You got the floor.
I understand about missing Bible camp because in 2011, Dave had a stroke and I was down and I was going to go to camp. I was going to do this and that. The director had to call me twice and tell me to think and pray about it. I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going. And what I'm missing this year is like we always go to travel to meet friends. Last year we went to 3 places, and this year we're not traveling to see anybody until maybe Christmas, if we can do that. I don't know.
Maybe if we can, that's it. What are the roads going to look? What's the travel system going to look like in that time? So yeah, 3 trips, and those have been taken away. I missed. It's kind of funny. I'm glad Caitlin's here because I'm going to pick on her. But yeah, that's you. I've only missed 2 years of Bible camp, really, since I was about 2 or 3 years old. Now, 1 year I missed because I was uninvited, and that's a different story. We won't talk about that. That may be another devotional at some other point. But the only other time I've ever missed a week of camp in almost 40 years, the only time was Caitlin was born during Bible camp. And so my grandfather used to have a policy. You can't get married and you can't have babies during camp because you've got to be free. You got to be available to come help at camp. But we broke that rule one time. So Caitlin always got to celebrate her birthday at Bible camp. And this year, can't do that this year, which is a big bummer. But yeah, so other than, in 1999, that was the last time I had not been at Bible camp, 21 years. So that's a big one. Traveling is bad. Jackie's over there on Facebook. She's mentioning a trip to a place called Shaco Springs. And I've actually gotten to be a part of that. And some other folks have. I know Dave and Mary know about that trip and getting to go down there. That's a 3-day kind of conference workshop that does some really good work and lets people see people that they haven't had a chance to interact with over the course of the year. And that got canceled. I was planning to go to that as well. And I guess I didn't count that on my list, but that was something I had been looking forward to going with folks. Jackie and Steve have gone in the past. They're the ones that connected me with that. So that's a big loss. Who else? You guys know stuff. There's people on Facebook right now. You're watching. Maybe Caitlin or Danya. You've got some things. What have you guys lost? Caitlin, you wanna mention anything?
Pretty sure you already mentioned the pretty big one.
Yeah, that's what we kind of started this with. This pity party is born out of my frustration over not getting to go to camp, and I know that's one of your big ones too. But, there's some other things, some other travels. Caitlin was supposed to go on. Hey, there's my wife. Caitlin was, I'll get there. Caitlin was supposed to go on a mission trip overseas with Kirk Brothers and some other folks. And that mission trip got canceled. So lost out on that. That was a pretty big deal. Autumn, what do you want to mention?
A lot of kids are missing their ball seasons.
Yeah. We've been seeing that. A lot of folks that we're connected with, that play at Underwood, or whether that down at the Florence, at the Sportsplex in the city, things like that. That's something that has been lost. And man, I couldn't imagine losing the opportunity to play, baseball or soccer or whatever it was, that I had been looking forward to. So that's a pretty big loss. We've already talked about graduations. Go ahead, Dave. Yeah, absolutely.
I really miss going to Glenwood nursing home every Monday. about 10 o'clock.
Absolutely. Yeah, when they called us, and I think we got contacted from each of the nursing homes that we, are connected with. Started with Glenwood and the singings and the Bible classes and those kinds of things. And then it went on to, El Reposo and, Lauderdale Christian and the other places that we have Green Oaks and things like that we have connections with, and them saying, look, it's just not safe to have you come out here. Boy, those have been rough. Yeah, not having those on the calendar. That's a good one. That's a good reminder. I'm cheating a little bit. I saw Heather Borden jump on over on Facebook, and I'm thinking about when Martha Beasley went into the hospital, and they had to sit in the parking lot in their car and couldn't talk to anybody and couldn't get any, information out. That's, that was a miserable time. I remember talking on the phone, and just experiencing the frustration of not being able to go into the hospital to talk to doctors or to sit next to loved ones. That was rough. A lot of us missed out on the opportunity to personally attend the funeral service for Miss Ruby Handback, not being able to participate and share our suffering and grief with that family and be there for one another. The funeral industry has really been hurting by the adjustments that they've had to make. With that in mind, I'm going to try something. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I'm working on some new monitor options in my office. And so what I'm going to try to do is, I don't know how to do that. This may not work. Let's see. All right. I am sharing a portion of my screen with you. Let's see. Okay. This is something from the New York Times. They published the names of people who have passed away from COVID-19. And I know, again, there's a lot of issues or ideas, going on with that, but people have lost their lives, in all the suffering and grief that we're going to talk about, people that have passed away. And I see Heather finally, Facebook caught up with our live conversation and talked about what a tough time it was, especially for her mom. And I remember that, talking to Jacqueline and how tough that was. But here's this, again, I'm not really sure this is the first time I ever tried to share a portion of a screen before, but if you go to the NewYorkTimes.com, they have an interactive section. In their newspaper, they published names. It looks, I hope this isn't offensive, as close to Memorial Day as we are, but it reminded me of the Vietnam Memorial. It's just name after name after name on the sheet, of paper for the New York Times of people that passed away. But if you go to their website, you can find this section, and they put a little bit more information in what's going on. And they have, you can scroll through here and you can talk about people. I think it's kind of their obituaries, the things that their families have submitted, but then some additional work. And you can just scroll through this. I don't know if you can tell over on the far right side of the screen how it has these names. And I'm just, just showing you how long. I don't know if this helps. I don't know if this helps you see, but I've got my little mouse over here and all these names, and you can just drag down, and it's just name after name after name. This has caused an awful lot of sadness and grief over these last months as people have succumbed to this. I had an interview earlier on with an ER nurse in Dallas, Fort Worth, and she talked about the people that come to her, into her care, and how they, they're not making it, and other things like that. And so maybe here we've been a little bit fortunate that the deaths in Lauderdale County have not been as frequent at this point and have not touched us as personally, although that's still a very real possibility. but this has caused us a lot of, taken a lot from us. I'm looking at Facebook now, got some notes like Dorinda says, our kids don't understand why they can't celebrate their birthdays with friends. Oh man, when we went to see Brother Lewis, and Betty and drove past their house, that was really cool. And I think they understood, how neat that was. But I couldn't imagine, if you're 7 or 8 years old and you just want to have a party, you just want to, play with your friends and not being able to invite them over and have a good time, that's really frustrating. Hanging out with people, seeing people, being isolated. This isolation is a really big deal. Brooke Rivera mentioned that too, along with Jackie, not being able to spend time with people. I know Brooks had a birthday. Zion and Isaac both have had birthdays here in the past week. A lot of other people too that we've talked about, and they're just, they're just like sitting in their house, with the party hat on, woo, and that's tough. I have, I don't know how much I want to share or not, but being cooped up in the house and not being able to go to the gym. My gym has been closed down. It opened up last week. You would have thought I'd been there every day, but I haven't, but I'm gonna, but my weight on the scale has changed, not in a good way. So I guess I haven't lost everything. I have gained some things during this whole process that I'm not really happy about, but I'm going to have to make some adjustments there and get back to that. What I'm saying here, what I'm bringing out here is the idea that we need to acknowledge, we need to vocalize, I think we need to say how rattled we are, how frustrated we are. We need to get it off our chest, how upset it makes us when we lose these things, when these people, when these relationships or these opportunities, whatever it is, when those are taken away from us by this thing that's out of our control. And so, there's been a lot of talk about the stress, the anxiety that's come along in this situation. And part of it is the things that we've lost. And when I started, I tell people that I consider myself to be a stupid optimist. That's my name for myself, my nickname. I'm a stupid optimist. I'm going to do everything I can to find the silver lining. I'm going to do everything I can to try and figure out what's the good that can come out of it, or what's the one good thing that's going on in all this mess. And so, I've been really trying to just take it one day at a time and go through each one of these things individually. But when I sat down and started ticking off the boxes, all right, this got canceled and this got canceled, and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do this, and started realizing how much it's added up. I'm not real happy. I'm not real happy about it. It's not great. And I think that we need to give ourselves permission to do that a little bit. Now, the point of this pity party that we're throwing tonight is to give us all the chance, whether you're watching, wherever you're at watching, if you've got something you want to share, if you've got something that you want to throw into this pile, this is supposed to be cathartic. We're not just going to sit here and complain. This is not a complaining session. What we're going to do virtually is put all of this into a pile and then burn it at the end of the night, kind of thing. We're going to get it out of the way. We're going to get rid of it. That's our hope. That's our expectation. But we first have to unfold it. We first have to look at it, and pull it out and deal with it. And that is not a new phenomenon. What I'm thinking about tonight is when I came up with the idea of throwing ourselves a pity party for a few minutes is, first of all, that's important to do because we need to acknowledge stuff that is frustrating us, but then to also recognize that groups come together to do that very same thing a lot of times. And this is actually an Old Testament process that we can see demonstrated in the book of Psalms. I have 7 or 8 different Psalms that are called community laments. It is a community lament. As a group, people coming together and saying, this is what really makes me angry. This is what is really causing me sadness or anxiety or something else along those lines. And I thought we'd, just kind of point out what some of those are. So turn to Psalm chapter 44. Psalm chapter 44. This is, I'm just, pulling this out because it's an example. It's the first one that's listed as a communal lament in the book of Psalms, but there's several others there that fit into this category. And it's where the people of Israel have suffered some great catastrophe. And in going through this horrific event or this troubling situation, as a people, they come together and they have one another's backs. They allow each other to process their grief, their emotion, their struggle, and then they get that out in the open. They don't swallow that and try to hide it. And Psalm 44 is a good example of that. There's several different verses kind of in the introduction that talk about, look, God used to do really good stuff for us. We've noticed that in some sermons recently. The Psalms kind of start off by saying God used to do some really good stuff for our people, and now it looks like he's not, and I'm kind of upset about that. And that's frustrating. And so Psalm 44 says, here's all the good things that took place in the past, and yet verse 9 says, so in the conclusion, Psalm 44:9, in God we glory at all times and praise your name unceasingly, yet you have rejected and disgraced us. Now I'm reading from the Ketuvim. This is I've got the Tanakh. This is the Jewish Bible. I pulled out a little bit of a different translation tonight. I wanted us to look at I don't know if this is possible or not, but sometimes I feel like this is the Hebrew Bible. This is the Bible that the Jews really connect with and is a more direct reference to their kind of frame of mind. And so you have your Bible and your translation open. We talked about translations last week, but I wanted to read from the Tanakh, from the Jewish version of this, and kind of give you, how they phrase these things and see what makes sense. Skip down to verse 18. All this has come upon us, yet we have not forgotten you or been false to your covenant. Our hearts have not gone astray, nor have our feet swerved from your path, though you cast us crushed to where the sea monster is, and covered us over with deepest darkness. If we forgot the name of our God and spread forth our hands to a foreign God, God would surely search it out, for he knows the secrets of the heart. It is for your sake that we are slain all day long, that we are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. And then this version says, rouse yourself. Why do you sleep, O Lord? Awaken. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face, ignoring our affliction and distress? We lie prostrate in the dust. Our body clings to the ground. Arise and help us, redeem us as befits your faithfulness. Every time I read that verse 24, I'm reminded of how Elijah and the prophets of Baal, one of the things Elijah does when he's mocking the prophets of Baal who can't seem to get Baal to answer their cries for, to light this altar on fire, he says, well, maybe Baal's in the bathroom, or maybe he's taking a nap. Maybe he's asleep and you're just not yelling loud. Maybe if you yell louder, he'll hear you and wake up. And yet here, the people get to the point where their frustration is so evident that they can't, they feel like God is asleep on them as well. And they say, it doesn't feel like we've done anything wrong. It doesn't feel like we've rejected God. And yet these things keep happening to us, and it's frustrating. There are others. I'm just, throwing things out. If you want to look at the Psalms of Lament, of course, you can go research this a little bit more on your own, but Psalm 60 and Psalm 74 and 79, those are some good examples. And And that's 80, 85, and 90. Those are some that are on the list that are considered these community laments, this group of people getting together and expressing their frustration. And one of the things that's tough about these Psalms, like Psalm 44 and is as an example, I like it when it ends on a happy ending. I like it when it circles back around and David comes back and he's like, oh, woe is me, life is terrible, everything's awful, but I'm not worried because God's got it under control, everything's going to be fine. And, he ends with this upbeat, don't panic, keep calm and keep going or whatever. And I think that most of the Psalms, a lot of the Psalms do that, but Psalm 44 doesn't end that way. It's like, we're waiting. We're waiting. And here we are stuck in the middle of a circumstance where things are still being taken away from us. People have lost their jobs. The unemployment, rate has skyrocketed. They're worried that some of the jobs, I saw an article that said, and again, these guys are prognosticating, and some of them are pessimistic and some of them are optimistic, but somebody said 42% of the jobs that are lost during this economic downturn may not come back. They may not be available once we get the economy back up and rolling again. People are going to have to look for a different job in a different sector. I hope that number's high. I hope that that's not an accurate prognosis, but it's a possibility, And so people losing wages, people not being able to go to work, to interact, and those, those kinds of examples. But we're waiting, and we're trying to see what God is going to do. That reminds me of a comment Kathy Alexander made over on Facebook. She says, plant a flower pot, plant a flower in a pot, and see how that grows. Watch God work, and it's a reminder. Things take time. Things that are worth it, take some patience. We have to endure waiting on some things. I think that's a good reminder. I think that's a good point. While we're in this period of not knowing stuff, it's really good to be able to be reminded of that. Good things come to those who wait, I guess, is what we're talking about. But I want it to be better. I want it to be, over. I want to make plans. I want to be able to go and do these things. I want to be able to get back to normal. I want to enjoy the things that we haven't been able to enjoy for a long time. And it's frustrating and it's stressful. And there's been a lot of talk about people, getting antsy with one another, having difficulties in our relationships because we're on edge over things, and how we've got to learn to deal with that, what we've got to do with it. But we feel like we've lost our way a little bit. Part of our pity party tonight, I found an article over at Psychology Today. This is by Elio Martino, and he writes an article about following your true north. When I'm going to use the shipping analogy, when you lose your anchor, how to follow your true north. And of course, that's terminology we don't necessarily use a lot, but the article starts off, he says, when the ocean is calm and you can see the land, it's easy to navigate to the north. You can see the way forward with your own eyes. All you have to do is stay the course. However, when the tides of emotion are high, when the skies are cast over with fear, isolation, and confusion, it can appear impossible to know which way you're really heading. You're wrestling just to control the ship, let alone steer to the north, true north. It's in these moments of doubt and fear that we begin to question which way north is, despite what our compass might be telling us. And so he's spent some time connecting that to the current situation. During this pandemic, you may feel like your life has been turned upside down by a situation far beyond your control. I think this is exactly kind of a good description of what we're dealing with and what we're struggling through, so many of us in different ways. And what he talks about is your value system is your true north. Why it's so important for us, my value system comes from my faith, comes from my understanding of God and my relationship with him. As a minister, as a counselor, whenever I talk to anybody, my first thought whenever I'm trying to navigate through any kind of situation, my value system goes to the faith relationship with God, through what I read in scriptures, through the interactions that I have with God's people. I can't get away from that. That is my true north. That's the magnet that pulls. Now, it doesn't mean I always make the right choices or do the right things, but what I'm saying is that my worldview, my value system is shaped by that. That's our default setting. And so tonight, what I'm going to talk about when we talk about our value system, what is it that pulls you? You know, what is it that you default to? And how does that become our true north, our compass that guides us when there's a storm blowing and when you can't navigate by the stars and you can't see the way in front of you and you don't know if you're headed towards land or if you're headed towards something difficult or not. That's our value system, are the statements and qualities that help us steer when we're in a state of uncertainty. They cut through the anxiety, they cut through the questions, and they become our baseline for deciding what we're going to do. When we're isolated, when we're alone, like a lot of us have been through this time, we tend to really focus on our thought processes, on our thinking and our decision making. We're preoccupied with planning for possible futures or figuring out, well, what do I do about this? And what do I do about this? And because there's so much uncertainty, it becomes very easy for us to feel like our anchor has been lost. And so if you're floating around, if you're a ship lost at sea and you're in the middle of the ocean, you're not going to have an anchor that's long enough, that's deep enough to settle you into one place. I mean, the ocean's miles and miles deep. And so you're not going to have a chain with an anchor attached to the end that you can just drop all the way to the ocean floor. You're going to be floating around. You're going to be lost while that storm blows, and you're going to have to weather that storm and make the best that you can. And so there's that uncertainty. We're kind of doing that emotionally right now with all this because we don't know what's going to be taken away from us next. We don't know what we're going to face, what decisions are coming next. And so what we revert to, what we go back to is our default, our value system. And so it's not just necessarily goals that we make, although goals are an important part of it. For instance, I talked about fitness a little while ago, and I was having a phone conversation with somebody else about this a couple of weeks ago. And, we may decide, look, I need to go, and I have done this. I'm proud of this. I'm thankful for this. I've been walking in our neighborhood an awful lot more. I mentioned this last week on Sunday morning. It did wind up bringing me a project that I had to do at my house because of something that we saw when we were out walking the neighborhood, but that's okay. Different story. But I've been doing a lot more walking because I need to get out. I need to spend some time in the sun. I recognize the need for some fresh air and for some opportunities to just clear my head and walk. And so that's a decision that I made, whether that's 1 mile or 5 miles or whatever that is, however much time that takes, 20 minutes, an hour, that's a decision, which is one thing. But the value system is what goes behind my decision to do that. And so it's not just a matter of saying, look, I need to do something for my health. That's a decision. The value is, okay, I understand that it is important for me to clear my head. I understand that it's important for me to move physically, to get up and to go outside and to engage in these things rather than to sit in one room and stare at a computer screen or a television screen or a phone screen and not move and get caught up in this tunnel vision, narrow world. That's an example of a value system. And so because of that value system, I'm going to make decisions based on it. And so when our value system right now is based on our relationship with God and it's based on our faith, then that's what we're going to default to. And in these times of uncertainty, we're going to go back to, all right, I'm anxious about this, but I'm still going to throw myself into the arms of God. I'm still going to try and figure out what I'm waiting on. It seems like that's what these lament psalms are doing, what these pity parties are in the Old Testament. They're saying, God, we haven't done anything wrong that we know about. We're following you. We haven't disgraced you. And yet we're struggling right now, and we're waiting for you to answer us, to do something about it. And over again, it's not just a one-time thing. So I think, again, we see that it's appropriate for us at different times in our life that we need to vocalize those things as well. I did a little reading on the concept of pity. I don't like pity parties. When I thought about calling tonight's little Devo a pity party, I didn't like the idea. But I realized, the Bible sometimes speaks in positive ways about pity. For instance, in Judges chapter 2, I'm just looking at a couple of passages. I'm throwing these out here. Judges chapter 2 and verse 18. It talks about that the Lord was moved to pity whenever the Israelites groaned in their oppression, talking about the period of the judges, and the reason God would raise up a judge was because he had pity. In Psalm 72 and verse 13, God has pity on the poor and the helpless, and he will save the lives. The famous passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 about iron sharpens iron, and a threefold cord is not easily broken. The need to depend on each other and to have those connections. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse number 10, it says, when two people travel together, if one falls, his companion can lift him up, but pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. So there's a lot of passages about having that outlook. In Joel chapter 2, let them say, have pity on your people, Lord, and do not make your inheritance a disgrace. And so, these ideas where we recognize when we have pity, either on ourselves or on someone else, I see in that a recognition that things are not the way that we want them to be. We cannot live permanently in that state. We cannot stay there all the time. Woe is me, or this is terrible, or doom and gloom, or if only it could be this way, and why isn't it this way? If we occupy ourselves with that thought process all of the time, then it's going to drag us down, and it's going to drag people around us down. But that doesn't mean that we always have to pretend like everything's okay. Sometimes we need to sit back and we need to say, yep, this is not good. This is frustrating. This is upsetting. Because that's the only way that we can process it. Otherwise, we're going to be stuffing these things down. We're going to be trying to ignore them and overlook them, and that's not going to help us. So, we're talking a little bit about grief. Usually we think about grief as something that we go through when we lose a loved one. If someone close to us passes away, that's what we grieve. But grieving is a process that we go through during any loss. Some losses are more significant than other losses. I don't necessarily think we should react to every loss in the same exact way. If I really like my pen and I lose it, I don't think that I need to be as emotionally distraught about that as I am if Dudley, who's my dog at the house, and we've had Dudley for 10 or 11 years now, if he passes away, or if he, gets off of his chain and gets away and we lose him, that's going to be a harder thing for me to deal with than this pen, and then people that are closer to me, the closer they are to me, the harder it is to deal with that loss, whether it's a person or a thing, or even something that we hold on to, an idea or an ideal. I ran across an article as a video that I watched. I saw the connection on Facebook. Matt Dobbs had a video on when we try to convert people. He's talking about evangelism. I'm thinking, how is this going to come in? But he talks about the grief process that's involved in evangelism. And I was like, well, this is interesting. So I went over and talked and listened to what he had to say. And he said, we get frustrated sometimes when we have a Bible study with somebody. Maybe it's a one-time Bible study, or maybe we meet with somebody 4 or 5 times. We meet with somebody for, 10 studies, and they're not converted, or they don't seem to be making the progress that we want them to make. And we get frustrated with that, and we feel like giving in or throwing in the towel, giving up. Because it doesn't seem like we're getting through to them the way that we want to, the way that we think that we should. And what his point was in this video is we need to understand what we are asking someone to do when we try to convert them to the gospel of Christ. What we're asking them to do is give up their previous life, their previous worldview, their previous understanding about how things worked. And that's a tremendous loss. That's a foundation that you're taking away from them. And so he actually goes through, you may be familiar with the Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of grief, and there's been a lot of extra work that's been done through the years on those. But, he says when you're trying to convert someone with the gospel, you may need to take them through the stages or through the different experiences of grieving that they need to go through before they can fully let go or release from this psychological foundation that they've held on to their whole life, especially if they were, maybe a Muslim or an atheist or an agnostic or, some other type of wildly different worldview and value system. And then you're telling them to abandon that for something else. You're telling them that they've been wrong their whole life. You're telling them perhaps that their family has been and is wrong. And that can be a very difficult, that can be a very emotionally difficult process to take people through. And we sometimes just get caught up in the mental, look, check this box off. Is this true or not true? And I believe from a factual standpoint, the gospel is overwhelmingly easy to believe. And I know not everybody has that same understanding, but as I have compared it to the other options that are out there, personally in my own life, to try and see what measures up, I might be able to get a glimpse of, okay, I can understand why somebody thinks that way. Or I might look at this over here and I might say, okay, maybe if I grew up being told that, then that might get my attention. I might have a hard time letting go of that. But when I look at the gospel, it really does seem to be the most surefire answer to the situations that we're dealing with as humans in this world. And so from a mental standpoint, from a fact standpoint, check it off. Yeah, the gospel, that's it. But there's more to it than that. We're asking someone to put to death something. Baptism we look at as a death, burial, and resurrection. So don't gloss over that when we're talking with people. They have to go through a grief process. They may need to have a pity party with you. You may need to sit with them while they grieve the realization of what they're losing, you're asking them to leave behind. And that can be pretty deep and pretty emotionally difficult as well. I'm just trying to get us to consider the many different ways that grief can creep up on us in our life. Stress gets to us, loss accumulates over time, different uncertainties build up, and it affects us emotionally. And we have need of recognizing that and recognizing it in each other, giving each other space to do that. I'm calling this the pity party because as a group, we need to be able to look at each other and say, I understand that you're frustrated. I can see why you are upset by this situation that's going on. I'm glad I'm not in it, or something along those lines. And then we need to be willing to listen and encourage each other to keep waiting on God. Don't give up. And so that's kind of where my brain's been going over the past few days. I know that all of you have lost something or another. And if you sit down and think about those things, maybe you've tried to avoid thinking about it. Tonight's supposed to be giving you permission to spend some time doing that. But if you're on the other end of the spectrum and all you've been noticing is the doom and the gloom, all you've been able to focus on is the anxiety, the uncertainty, and the loss, then I want to encourage you to try and swing back the other direction, to look for opportunities to, I'll finish kind of with Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, talking about this verse with somebody else just yesterday, as a matter of fact. And I don't know if anybody else has a thought that they want to give. I'm going to kind of be silent for a minute. If anybody wants to unmute their microphone and say anything, or anybody on Facebook wants to type anything, now's the time while we're turning to Philippians. All right, so my final thought tonight is while we have this pity party and while it's okay to bring these things out, we put them out in the open and then we say, Lord, here's what's got us. Here's what's got me around the throat right now. And some of us are going through different things, but we're all experiencing in general this grief over things that have been taken from us. And that's really, we talk about complicated grief. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that tonight, but again, we expect to lose some things in our life. We expect some things to be, to not last forever because we live in such a changing world. And so grief, most of the time, is grieving something that we saw coming. Complicated grief is when something's taken from us that we didn't expect to happen. We didn't expect this corona thing to happen. We didn't expect to be asked by our government to stay at our homes and to close restaurants and to close movie theaters and to not go to Bible camp and to not be able to meet together in church, in person at the church building. And that's tough. That's tricky. And we bring all that out, and when it happens to us unexpectedly, then it can really knock us for a loop. Being able to still trust in God in those situations, that's our value system. That goes back to that's our compass, that's our magnet. I'm going to learn to lean on God. I'm going to keep obeying him. I think Michael Burns mentioned that over on Facebook. Trusting and obeying God needs to be our value system, needs to be our core to keep pulling us in the right direction. And even when all this stuff is floating around, here's where Philippians 4 comes into play. All of us, I think, need to remember in chapter 4 and verse number 8, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is lovely, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Dwell on these things. And so whatever it is that's afflicting you right now, maybe it's the demons inside your own head. Maybe it's the things that have been, the shadows that have been following you. And now this situation only makes them seem stronger, seem more powerful. Or maybe it's something that you didn't expect to happen to you when all of this came and you've been bombarded and you've been hit. Whatever it is that's gotten you, that has affected you right now, acknowledge your need to bring that out of the open, to grieve it, and then process the ability to let it go and continue to wait on and rely on God. And as you stare at that, I'll go back to Kathy's example, as that flower pot, as that soil, you water it day after day after day, and you're waiting and you're waiting. And then eventually that little bitty sprout begins to pop through the soil. And then over time, you begin to see the fruits of your labor, quite literally, and the fruits of your patience. I see Mary's got a hand up, so absolutely. Give me your thoughts.
I think it's really good what you're saying, because we all need to give each other time to grieve, like if you lost a person or an event. And so I had to give myself permission. I can be sad I lost someone. So it's okay to be sad and not have to put on the face of happiness, even at church. What's wrong? Well, my uncle died. I try to come out with that now instead of saying, oh, nothing's wrong.
Right. That's exactly right. Maybe if nothing else, Mary just summed up the entire purpose of what I wanted to talk about for these last 45, 50 minutes is we need permission to do that. We need to give each other that permission. And so tonight, I didn't want to seem selfish, but I thought I would throw myself out there first. And here are the things that have frustrated me. And I appreciate the people that have expressed condolences. I appreciate people telling me that they're sorry about that and giving me a shoulder, virtually or physically, to lean on, while we go through that. But it's also about, let's open that door for each other, find a place, find a person where you can get those things out in the open, grieve them, let them be acknowledged, and then look to let them go, as we process. But you don't expect to do that in one day. You don't expect to do that in one episode or one instance. And this is no different. We need to continue giving each other that opportunity and that option. So I really appreciate everybody that participated tonight. I appreciate the folks over on Facebook for doing the same thing. We'll finish with a prayer, and then we'll dismiss, and hopefully you'll join us. This Wednesday will be our final online devotional before we get to start our summer series on June the 3rd. So again, remember that and plan to be here at the building. It will be streaming, of course. We'll, the same avenues that you've been able to be here for these devotionals, except for the live Zoom. We'll have our summer series online as well if you're not able to join us. But this Wednesday we'll have our final series in the Bible Project videos we've been looking at, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But we'll finish with a prayer now, if you wouldn't mind bowing with me as we go to God. Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful that we can come into your presence and that you listen to us no matter what's going on in our lives, and no matter how we are responding to them. I'm no poet like the Psalms, like the psalmists are. I can't put my words down in a flowing way, but I'm still struggling, and a lot of us are struggling. And tonight we come to you together as a group, and we want to be united as a family, as a community. But we also want to express that we are struggling in different ways. And Lord, I don't know what each one of us are dealing with tonight. I know what I'm going through. I know a few things that others have shared with me, but Lord, you know every single thing. You hear every cry. You even know the things that we don't vocalize ourselves. And we simply throw ourselves into your arms tonight. And I don't know how you will fix everything. And I don't ask you to fix everything, but I do ask you to comfort us and help us during this difficult time. As we think about the things that are lost, as I think about the opportunities to interact with young boys and girls this summer, the work that we're able to do for the kingdom at Palmetto Bible Camp and Maywood and Indian Creek and Wiregrass and Horizons and May-South and Mid-South and so many other places where that opportunity has been taken away from us the way that we're currently accustomed to providing it. Help us to seek new and in this situation, better ways to reach out and to be an impact for those people. But we do continue to grieve the loss of these things in our lives. And we ask you to comfort us and to satisfy us with your goodness and yourself so that we can rely on you no matter what. Help us as we go through this week to be the kind of people that you want us to be that city set on a hill so that we can shine like stars in the night sky. Forgive us when we fall and give us the strength to stand and to try again. And we offer this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, I really appreciate it. I feel better. And I don't know if that's, helpful or not, but you've helped me, so I appreciate it.
See ya.
Take care, Mary. Thank you.